Welcome to NTD Evening News. Our top story tonight, President Trump saying he wants to finish Iran first, and Cuba's just a question of time. That's as the Pentagon's announcing a significant decrease in retaliation from the Iranian regime, Mario Tzu at the White House. The U.S. and Israel launching a new widespread wave of attacks on Iran. NATO members are deploying more warships and other military assets. Arian Pazdar has the latest on the developments in the Middle East. The Pentagon says that previous waves of dealing with cartels in our region hasn't been working and a stronger approach is needed. Jason Blair has more. A federal trade court with exclusive jurisdiction over importer claims has ordered the Trump administration to begin refunding billions of dollars. Arlene Richards with a legal update.
This is NTD Evening News, live from our global headquarters in New York City. Here's Tiffany Meyer.
Good evening and thank you for joining us tonight. The U.S. and Israel launching a new widespread wave of strikes on Iran. What's left of the Islamic regime continues expanding its attacks on more countries in the surrounding region. And NATO members are deploying additional warships and other assets. NTD's international correspondent Arian Pazdar has the latest.
Explosions in multiple Iranian cities on Thursday. Israel announces a new widespread wave of attacks on Iran. Explosions being heard in the capital city of Tehran, in the nearby city of Karaj, and in the Kurdish city Sanandaj. The US military releasing this video showing strikes on Iran's mobile missile launch capabilities. And the Israeli military releasing cockpit footage it says shows an Israeli fighter jet shooting down an Iranian jet over Tehran. The Israeli pilot announcing the completion of the mission before saying the target is down. Iran trying to fire back. The regime published this video showing a missile being launched from an undisclosed location. Sirens being heard across Jerusalem amid incoming Iranian attacks. In central Israel, an Iranian missile falling into an open space. No casualties are being reported. Alerts are also issued across Tel Aviv. Iran continues attacking more nearby countries in the region, now also striking Azerbaijan. According to Azerbaijan, Iran fired 2 drones, with one making impact near a school. Azerbaijan's president says just shortly before the attack, he had agreed to help Iran by evacuating diplomats from an embassy in Lebanon.
In return for all this, they strike us in an ugly, cowardly, and shameless manner. This stain will never be erased from their ugly and unsightly face.
Azerbaijan is now preparing unspecified response measures. European nations are sending more military equipment to the Mediterranean Sea after multiple Iranian attacks on NATO territory, such as on a British military base in Cyprus and on Turkey. The UK is preparing to send a naval destroyer to Cyprus next week and 2 anti-drone helicopters, which are expected to arrive even sooner.
We're working with the Americans in the deployment from our bases. We are working together in the region. The US and the British working together to protect both the US and the British in joint bases where we're jointly located.
Spain is also sending a warship to Cyprus, joining France's aircraft carrier and ships from the Greek Navy. Arian Pazdar, NTD News.
The Pentagon identifying the last 2 of 6 soldiers killed in Operation Epic Fury. All 6 Army Reserve soldiers were killed by an Iranian drone attack on a tactical operations center in Kuwait. On Sunday, the Department of War confirming the death of Major Jeffrey O'Brien of Indian Ola, Iowa. The department believes the 6th soldier to be Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzin of Sacramento, California. A medical examiner will complete a positive identification. The 4 troops previously identified are Captain Cody Cork, Sergeant First Class Nicole Amore, Sergeant First Class Noah Tejans, and Sergeant Declan Cody. All 6 soldiers were part of the same Army Reserve Command in Des Moines, Iowa, before their deployment to Kuwait. Travelers in the Middle East remain stranded as U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran continue. Airspace closures have forced airlines to cancel or reroute flights through some of the world's busiest transit hubs. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on how passengers are dealing with the disruptions.
Thousands of travelers are stuck in Dubai. Emirates aircraft stood still on the tarmac as smoke rose in the distance, following reports of missile interceptions and falling debris. Victoria Lokhmatova and her family were trying to get back home to Serbia.
Despite the fact that we had a lot of minutes on call with the aircraft company, we tried to reach out to our embassies, and I would say that the most helpful was local community.
Victoria's husband, Michael, said their travel situation was a test for the family, but they appeared to be handling it.
It's a lot to deal with just suddenly. So it's becoming 1 week of holiday, become just after that 1 week of quite stressful organization from family working everyday life point of view.
Indian tech entrepreneur Varun Krishnan was stranded in Doha after his flight to Barcelona was forced to turn back. But he tried to look at the bright side.
The good news is I've got my suitcase. My luggage is here with me, so I don't have to worry about my medicines and shopping for clothes. So they've managed to trace the bag out and get it delivered to the hotel, which is nice.
Krishnan said it was unclear when normal flight operations would resume. He said Qatar Airlines told him that they will provide an update tomorrow.
I mean, I'm actually evaluating other options to get back home because I also feel from what's happening in the region, nobody's wanting to de-escalate. Everybody seems to be wanting to maintain the status quo, at least from being in Qatar.
Carriers continue to reroute flights in the Middle East as U.S. and Israeli strikes against Iran continue. Until then, thousands of travelers remain stranded across the region. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
While many people across the world are taking to the streets to celebrate the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, the Chinese regime is working to counter the narrative with paid protests. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has more.
Celebrations are sweeping major U.S. cities this week as crowds thank President Trump for strikes that eliminated Iran's top regime leaders. But CCP propaganda is pushing back, with groups tied to the Chinese regime organizing counter-protests against the strikes. Those include the Party for Socialism and Liberation, Answer Coalition, the People's Forum, and Code Pink, recognized by Congress and the State Department as being linked to Beijing.
That the protests are not grassroots. These NGOs are financed by a millionaire who lives in Shanghai, who has very close contacts with the Chinese Communist Party.
Some are also connected to Neville Roy Singham, a Marxist businessman with ties to the CCP.
Neville Roy Singham donated over $20 million to the People's Forum through shell companies.
Following the U.S.-Israeli strikes on Iran, China's economy is taking a major hit. Beijing already slashing growth targets, with experts doubting any real growth ahead.
But it's probably going to be negative, and especially because China's in a deflationary period.
The conflict has choked oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz, where China buys about 80% of Iran's sanctioned crude. China's authorities have now ordered major refiners such as Sinopec and PetroChina to halt signing new export contracts.
Gas prices in China up 11.0%. Diesel up 13.5%. And the National Development and Reform Commission is telling refiners, don't export anything and cancel contracts if you can.
This fuel crunch may even slow China's AI race.
Two of the biggest AI contractors in China are Huawei and ZTE. They both have huge contracts in Venezuela and Iran for which they are now not going to be paid. And you know, we're talking about tens of billions of dollars in contracts of revenue that they were expecting to get that they weren't getting. They were doing a lot of AI testing in these countries.
While many cheer the blow to a terror-sponsoring regime, China faces a double blow: lost allies and skyrocketing energy costs that could derail its economy. Reporting by Jack Bradley, NTD News.
The Pentagon calls foreign cartels the gravest threat in the Western Hemisphere, and administration officials say that prosecutions alone won't be enough to defeat them. NTD correspondent Jason Blair has more.
Narco-traffickers, drug cartels engage in campaigns of terror, violence, and corruption to enrich themselves and expand their insidious influence. This is the single gravest threat to security in our region and across our hemisphere.
Pentagon leaders are highlighting how foreign criminal organizations have been wreaking havoc on American citizens.
More than 1 million Americans were killed by fentanyl, cocaine, and other drugs.
Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy and Homeland Security Advisor, says after decades of effort, leaders have learned that there's not a criminal justice solution to the cartel problem.
There are elements of the problem that require a criminal justice solution, to be sure. But just as we fought al-Qaeda and fought ISIS, the reason why this is a conference with military leadership and not a conference of lawyers is because these organizations can only be defeated with military power.
Cartel drones have also been a rising concern. In February, Mexican cartel drones breached U.S. airspace, resulting in a sudden closure of airspace in the El Paso, Texas area. The U.S. military disabled the drones, and a few hours later, the closure was lifted. Ahead of the U.S. hosting the World Cup and America's 250th birthday activities, the Department of Homeland Security announced a new office in January to advance drone and counter-drone technologies. The Department of Homeland Security Secretary said this will help us continue to secure the border and cripple the cartels, protect our infrastructure, and keep Americans safe. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Jason Blair, NTD News.
A federal judge yesterday ordered the Trump administration to begin issuing more than $100 billion in potential tariff refunds. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
In a 3-page order on Wednesday, federal trade court Judge Richard Eaton, the judge with exclusive jurisdiction over the Trump tariff cases, ordered the administration to pay back all imports eligible for automatic court-ordered refunds. Or in other words, those that are still within the legal window to challenge the tariffs charged or have already filed lawsuits. The ruling follows the Supreme Court's February 20th opinion that President Trump's sweeping global tariffs were unconstitutional. A 6-3 high court majority said the president didn't have the authority to impose the tariffs under an emergency powers law. They left open Trump's ability to impose tariffs under different trade laws. But it's still unclear how the refund process will play out. The current order is silent on a deadline for the refunds to be paid or whether there are any reporting requirements. It also doesn't say whether or not the administration must pay interest. And as dozens of new cases continue to come in, the court is temporarily placing them on hold. The Trump administration is expected to quickly challenge the refund ruling. Judge Eaton has scheduled a hearing in the case for Friday. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And we'll be right back with more breaking coverage of the Iran war. Stay with us. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The House has voted and the Department of Homeland Security funding bill has cleared the chamber. Republicans warn that the shutdown threatens key security agencies, while Democrats say the bill lacks oversight for immigration enforcement. NTD's Chris Bobb has the details.
The House has voted, and the Department of Homeland Security funding bill has passed 221 to 209, with 4 Democrats joining all Republicans. Republicans say the shutdown is putting critical security agencies at risk. Democrats say the bill lacks needed oversight of immigration enforcement. Here's a look at the debate.
Now, especially with conflict in the Middle East, is not the time to block funding for the Department of Homeland Security. We could be under attack by Iran.
Republicans say the DHS funding bill isn't about ICE or CBP, which already received $75 billion from the One Big Beautiful Bill.
ICE is already funded for years. CBP is already funded for years. But the funding that comes from that bill funds our Coast Guard, our TSA, our cybersecurity professionals.
Some lawmakers say the fight over DHS funding has become political, leaving frontline personnel and their families in uncertainty.
Right now, we're playing politics with something like Department of Homeland Security funding. I don't need my active duty members to be worried about the safety and security of their families that they've left here in the homeland.
When asked about what reforms she would support from Democrats, Congresswoman Lisa McClain said,
"From my perspective, not much. Because what they're asking for is absolutely ridiculous. What we're asking for is follow the law and protect American citizens. The party of masks, right, all of a sudden wants to unmask all the ICE agents. You should ask yourself why we're in this situation to begin with. If 20 million people didn't cross our borders, we wouldn't be having this situation.
One of the demands that's been communicated was that they wanted ICE to cease operations or to not operate within proximity of voting locations. What does that tell you?
Democrats and Republicans debating a DHS funding bill in the Senate, the measure failing to reach 60 votes needed for cloture, leaving lawmakers at an impasse over oversight of immigration enforcement.
Democrats do want to ensure that TSA and CISA and FEMA and other important agencies are funded. We will not cut a blank check funding without reforms for ICE and Border Patrol.
Democrats claim they are no longer for open borders. Their proposal completely defunds the Customs and Border Protection. HSI is responsible for capturing these men, child pornographers, child predators, sex traffickers, drug traffickers.
Meanwhile, President Trump announcing he will be replacing Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem at the end of the month and nominating Senator Markwayne Mullin to lead DHS.
Listen, I am super excited about this opportunity, but it came at a little bit of surprise for us. We're going to try to earn everybody's vote.
Mullin says his focus will be enforcing Congress's laws and keeping the homeland safe. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Chris Bobb, NTD News.
And the House just moments ago has failed to pass the War Powers Resolution. The legislation was aimed at restricting President Trump's military operations against Iran. The vote was 212 to 219, with 2 Republicans voting in favor of the resolution, 1 not voting, and 4 Democrats voting against it. The purpose of the War Powers Resolution was to end the U.S. military action in Iran and require the president to obtain congressional approval before resuming any hostilities. The measure also failed in the Senate yesterday. This means the Trump administration can continue Operation Epic Fury against the Iranian regime, at least for now. President Trump saying he needs to help pick Iran's leader. The regime change in Cuba is only a question of time. That's as the Pentagon says America's bomber force has struck nearly 200 targets deep inside of Iran in the past 72 hours. And Admiral Cooper announcing a 90% decrease in ballistic missile attacks and an 83% decrease in drone attacks from the Iranian regime. We now go live to NTD's Washington correspondent Mario Tsu at the White House. Mari, good evening.
Tiff, good evening. Yeah, that's right. President Trump is now urging the Iranian military to, quote, lay down their arms. And he's also urging Iranian diplomats around the globe to request asylum. That's as the Pentagon is now touting the successes of Operation Epic Fury in its 6th day, saying that there's been a significant reduction in retaliatory strikes from the Iranian regime, and that it's destroyed over 30 Iranian ships. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth saying that the regime is hoping that the U.S. cannot sustain this momentum, calling that hope a, quote, really bad miscalculation for the IRGC. Take a look.
The Navy is gone. 24 ships in 3 days. That's a lot of ships. Their anti-aircraft weapons are gone. So they have no air force. They have no air defense. All of their airplanes are gone. Their communications are gone. Missiles are gone. Launches are gone. About 60% and 64% respectively.
We've got no shortage of munitions. Our stockpiles of defensive and offensive weapons allow us to sustain this campaign as long as we need to. Again, our munition status only increases as our advantage increases. Our capabilities.
President Trump telling Axios that he needs to be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader, just as he was in Venezuela, and that it must be someone who will bring harmony and peace to the region rather than continue the Ayatollah's policies.
Well, most of the people we had in mind are dead. So, we had some in mind from that group that is dead. And now we have another group. They may be dead also, based on reports. The United States will ensure that whoever leads the country next, Iran will not threaten America or its neighbors, Israel, anybody.
He's also praising Secretary of State Marco Rubio for pressuring communist Cuba, aiming for regime change through economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and supporting democratic dissidents.
But what's happening with Cuba is amazing, and we think that we want to finish this one first, but that will be just a question of time before you and a lot of unbelievable people are going to be going back to Cuba.
On day 5 of Operation Epic Fury, Republicans stressing the urgency of passing the bill to end the DHS shutdown as it fails to pass the Senate.
Now, especially with conflict in the Middle East, is not the time to block funding for the Department of Homeland Security. We could be under attack by Iran. Cybersecurity issues have already risen in our borders already in the last week.
This coming as President Trump announces Oklahoma Senator Markwayne Mullin will replace Kristi Noem as Secretary of Homeland Security at the end of March, while appointing her as Special Envoy for the Shield of the Americas, a new security initiative to dismantle cartels in the Western Hemisphere.
We have all kinds of new challenges, and that's why President Trump is undertaking going after the cartels by addressing it from the Western Hemisphere.
The cartels that operate in this hemisphere are the ISIS and the Al-Qaeda of the Western Hemisphere, and should be treated just as brutally and just as ruthlessly as we treat those organizations.
President Trump saying that Noem has, quote, served us well and has had numerous spectacular results, highlighting securing the border. Noem thanking the president for her new appointment while touting DHS accomplishments, including 3 million illegal aliens leaving the U.S. and locating 145,000 children. Meanwhile, the State Department has been working to get Americans out of harm's way who are stuck in the Middle East, the White House pushing back on criticism they failed to warn Americans in advance of the operation.
There was many signs put out by the State Department, and I wish that everyone in this room would report on them. The Secretary of State issued level 4 travel advisories dating back to January for many of these countries in the region.
And Tiff, they're chartering buses now, and as of last night, the first U.S. government-sponsored evacuation flight departed the region. The State Department is also announcing that 20,000 Americans have been repatriated since the beginning of Operation Epic Fury on February 28th, adding that they also provided direct assistance to 10,000 people via their 24/7 task force. Back to you.
All right, Mari, thanks for those updates. And we'll be right back with more breaking coverage of the Iran war. Stay tuned. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. The State Department is urging Americans in Israel, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE to register online for departure assistance. Officials say citizens should enroll through the Smart Travel Enrollment Program. They can also complete a crisis intake form. Authorities will then coordinate possible evacuation flights or ground transportation. Some commercial flights remain available in the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but officials warn routes could change or be limited. Qatar's airspace is temporarily closed, though a land border crossing into Saudi Arabia remains open. In Israel, Americans are advised to remain in shelter until further notice. The State Department says more than 20,000 Americans have already returned to the United States since Operation Epic Fury began. That includes more than 8,500 who returned on Tuesday alone. And joining us now to unpack the latest in the Iran war is Jacqueline Deal, president of the Long-Term Strategy Group and advisor at State Armor, and former CIA operative J. Michael Waller, senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy. Thank you both so much for joining us. Jackie, starting with you, we've not seen that much come out of China in response to this war, aside from words of moral backing and sending a delegation to mediate, some suggesting the regime is scrambling in response. Your thoughts on that, and also how the war is impacting China and its interests in the region?
Well, great to be with you, Tiff. Nice to see you, Michael. I think the Chinese are trying to gather their thoughts about this latest show of force and initiative from the U.S. military and its allies. In terms of their rhetoric or narrative, they're trying to cast the United States as disruptive or unreliable, but I think the facts belie that. I think the show of force from this administration has demonstrated that actually the United States and its allies are back doing their traditional work of enforcing international law. We saw this with the seizure of shadow fleet or sanctioned oil tankers in international waters from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean after the Maduro raid, and now with the Iran war. In Iran, of course, we had a regime that was illegally pursuing the nuclear weapons program, Additionally, it was funding proxies and militias that were extremely disruptive and violent throughout the region. So this is in many ways a return to form for the United States and its allies coming together to defend international law and liberal values. The Iranian regime had most recently, of course, cracked down on peaceful protesters just seeking basic human rights. Tens of thousands of them were mowed down. So I think it's going to be difficult for the Chinese Communist Party to interpret that. They've been kind of markedly silent at home on what the response of the Iranian people has been to this chance to gain basic freedoms and rights.
And Michael, on that note, multiple reports taking note of Chinese propaganda on overdrive since the war started, even bleeding over into protests on the streets here in America. Why is China trying to control the information space? What's at stake for the CCP here?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party must control the information flow if it's to survive its system of lies. So it has to dominate their narrative and control it, that Xi Jinping is nothing but a complete success back home and back within the party, where he gets credit for everything that goes right, but not that goes wrong. And right now things are going very wrong. In terms of in the United States, well, one of the best ways to undermine a country's efforts is to take advantage of and exploit and foment dissent and decisions and divisiveness within that country. And you see it occurring naturally in our society, but it's exploited by the CCP, which recycles mainstream politicians' criticisms and also funds through various covert means some of the street protests that we've been seeing.
And Jackie, in terms of economic impacts, reports say that China gets about half of its oil through the Strait of Hormuz and buying nearly all of Iran's sanctioned oil. Now, I've seen China halt diesel and gas exports, and it just issued its lowest annual growth target. How could this conflict further deepen China's economic woes?
That's a great question. I think we've seen them exercise caution. You know, they've, as you said, started to kind of husband their energy resources. They are, I think, dealing with the reality that they could be confronted with a prolonged situation where their access is not guaranteed to the energy from Venezuela or from Iran and the rest of the Gulf region that they had been accustomed to receiving. We heard reports last night that there's been a dramatic downturn in PLA operations, so Chinese military operations to put pressure on Taiwan. If that is part of the response or the outcome of Epic Fury, that's a welcome response for the United States and the peace-loving world.
And Michael, expanding on the Latin America component here, this Iran war comes, of course, on the heels of the Venezuela operation, and President Trump talked today talking about Iran and Cuba. Let's actually listen to that part now.
We also urge Iranian diplomats around the world to request asylum and to help us shape a new and better Iran with great potential. It's a country with great potential. There's much better future for Iran. It's now beginning. It's going to be, I think, a great future. And people, I want to thank all of the people that have been involved. Marco, you've been doing a fantastic job. And you've been doing a fantastic job on a place called Cuba. What's happening with Cuba is amazing. And we think that we want to finish this one first, but that will be just a question of time.
And Michael, what do you think the administration has in store for Cuba, and what could that mean for China?
Well, as the president said, it's just a question of time. The regime is really on its last legs. It's got a 20-hour-a-day blackout. Trump cut off all the Venezuelan oil lifeline to Cuba, but he also got Mexico to cut off its lifeline of oil to the Cuban regime, so that they've got no foreign sponsors anymore. The Chinese communists can do nothing to protect Cuba, like they could do nothing to protect Maduro in Venezuela, or nothing to protect the Islamic Republic in Iran. So this is a real punch in the face to Xi Jinping and to CCP diplomacy, because it just shows if you're an ally of China, the Chinese regime is not going to come and help you. And the material it sends you for your own self-defense is worthless against American armaments.
And Jackie, President Trump will also be hosting the Shield of the Americas Summit this Saturday. Leaders from El Salvador, Argentina, Chile, and others are expected to attend. Your thoughts on whether this will push back or curb China's influence here?
I certainly hope so. I mean, I think the president has already made great progress, as Michael was alluding, in operations so far to kind of take back our hemisphere and arrest the Chinese Communist Party's progress in trying to kind of block us in or corner us in our own backyard. We've seen, major blows to the CCP's alliance network in our hemisphere, and we're also starting to see physical infrastructure changes. So the recovery of ports in Panama that are important for the security of the canal and the ability of the U.S. to use the canal if in emergency we had to send American forces from the East Coast to the West Coast, or vice versa. We're starting to see pushback against the PRC's Belt and Road Initiative and other infrastructure and diplomatic and information technology, bio and space cooperation, again, in our backyard. All of those deals that our neighbors had signed with the Chinese Communist Party regime ultimately will be at the expense of our neighbors. And the United States, like State Farm, is a good neighbor. We're there to remind the countries in our hemisphere that if you work with the United States, you get the rule of law, you get property rights respected, you get a full package. When you work with the CCP, you get spyware in your infrastructure, you get threats of kill switches and backdoors, you get coercion, you get threats to cut off important trade if you displease the CCP. And really, that's not a deal that these countries want.
And Michael, some are saying that China is the future, that it's the dominant power in the East, and that the U.S. might as well negotiate now as it can't be stopped. Your response to that narrative?
Yeah, that narrative is gone. And you have it now. You've got China. The economy is nowhere near what the party was telling everyone it was going to be. And now Donald Trump controls and influences more than half of China's petroleum imports. That's a huge thing. He has cut off completely Communist China's heavily discounted oil imports from Iran and Venezuela, and completely throwing off the calculus of Xi Jinping's plans to invade Taiwan and to threaten Japan. So everything, this whole idea of China becoming a leader of the global South is falling apart right before China's eyes, where even Iranian warships off Sri Lanka can't escape the United States anymore. And there's nothing the CCP can do about it.
And Jackie, your thoughts on that narrative?
Well, I think, we're starting to defend the United States' position as a backer of the global order and international law, and work with our allies to do that. And that is a severe threat to the CCP's ambition of pushing out an alternative Beijing-led order where important decisions, are minimally at least run by the CCP. That's not a world that anyone wants. And I think what's equally important is that we continue to be aware of the Chinese Communist Party's inroads in the United States. So right from the beginning of Operation Epic Fury, you could see a businessman, the network of a businessman based in Shanghai, start to mobilize people in the United States for protests. That was exposed rapidly, and that's very important. Transparency is the kryptonite for these CCP political warfare operations in the country. And just today, the CCP Select Committee of the House of Representatives sent out a very firm letter on taking action against Chinese Communist Party outposts on our university campuses, the CSSAs. So that's another very promising sign. So I would say we're making progress on the high seas in our hemisphere, in important critical areas of the world for resources and choke points. And we're also making progress here in the United States.
And Michael, looking ahead, how does the Iran war impact President Trump's planned trip to China in April?
It gives him a lot more leverage than he had 1 week ago. Xi Jinping is going to have to cut some sort of deal that he won't want to do. Trump will have the initiative. He'll have the narrative. He controls so much of their oil imports. He controls whether or not their vessels shipping oil to China going through the Strait of Hormuz are going to receive insurance or U.S. naval protection. So she is going to have to really lose a lot of face on this and accept it. And nothing greater could be done for the leader of the Communist Party than to see him lose face before the whole world in front of Donald Trump.
Well, Jackie Dale, Michael Waller, thank you both so much for joining us.
Nice to be with you.
Thanks, Tiffany.
Coming up, the Trump administration says chronic disease is driving much of the nation's healthcare spending. Officials say expanding nutrition education in medical schools could be part of the solution. Christina Corona reports next. Welcome back. I'm Tiffany Meyer. President Trump says he must be personally involved in selecting Iran's next leader, as he was in Venezuela. According to Axios, the president said in their exclusive interview that he refuses to accept a new Iranian leader who would continue the policies of assassinated Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Joining us now to discuss potential successors is Shahrzad Ghani, publisher of the Persian edition of the Epoch Times. Shahrzad, thank you so much for joining us. Great to see you again. Now, the president today acknowledging that the son of the assassinated Supreme Leader is the most likely successor while rejecting his appointment. Trump telling Axios, quote, Khamenei's son is unacceptable. We want someone that will bring harmony and peace to Iran. What do we know about Khamenei's son, and how has he managed to escape assassination thus far?
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. There are some unofficial reports from inside Iran that they say Moshtaba Khamenei may not even be alive, and that there are news about his succession that they are publishing unofficially, that it's intended to maintain calm and preserve the regime right now. But even if he is alive, which means that means that he hasn't been at the location of the attack. Especially there were news 2 months back that he was in Russia, but apparently if he is alive, he hasn't been in Tehran, and we don't know his location at this moment. And Moshtaba Khamenei, in terms of who he is, he's the second son of Ali Khamenei. He has been considered one of the most influential figures, but behind the scenes, because he has never been much in public. He has never been on camera much. People don't know him much. Even their supporters don't know him much among ordinary people. But he has never held an official government position as well. And over the years, he developed very close ties with IRGC, top commanders and some of the supporters within the regime. He has been so close to them. So he's considered a figure that's capable of maintaining the regime, maintain the continuity within the power structure of the regime at this moment.
And while the Iranian regime has yet to announce a new supreme leader, statements by Iranian politicians today suggest an announcement could be imminent. Tell us about the possible contenders, looking both at those supported by the regime and those supported by the Iranian people.
Iran International is a media that is credible. It's a Farsi language and credible. Iran International has reported over the past 2 days that it's through its internal sources that the Assembly of Experts has already approved Moshtaba Khamenei to be the next supreme leader. But for security reasons, they're saying that this decision is not being made publicly announced. But however, if this report is not accurate, let's say it's not accurate, because we know that the state media, the regime media, has not officially confirmed that. There are several other names that can be a potential next leader. One of them is Hassan Khomeini, which is the grandson of Ruhollah Khomeini. Ruhollah Khomeini was the founder of the Islamic Republic. Another possible candidate is Alireza Arafi. He's an Iranian cleric. He's a political figure. He's a member of Assembly Experts, and he's considered a figure that has a close relationship with the leadership of the Islamic Republics. There's another candidate is Hassan Rouhani. He has been mentioned as a potential option, but he is associated with the reformist groups and has a lot of supporters among reformists. But none of these figures have public support among Iranian people. So many of Iranians are calling for a complete regime change. They do not want any leadership system like there is in those communist countries like North Korea or China. So they want fully, they don't want to have a leader.
And President Trump has expressed skepticism over Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of Iran's last Shah leading a post-war Iran. Trump suggesting that a leader from within the country would be more appropriate. In your view, would Pahlavi be accepted by the Iranian people and those in existing systems of power?
Well, he's a very popular figure, but he doesn't fit into the Islamic Republic. So it cannot be that the Islamic Republic remains and he also be the leader. No, that doesn't really work. This means that if regime needs to be changed so that a democratic person come and do the transition, like carry out the transition. So as we saw during the protests, his name was the one that people were chanting in the streets inside Iran. And also, it was the only name being called. And even the demonstrations outside of Iran, they had carried his photos. A lot of people, like even in one day outside the country on February 14th, over 1 million Iranian from the diaspora, they were protesting on the same day all around the world, especially in Berlin, Los Angeles, in Toronto, over 350,000 people just in Toronto. The similar numbers in different countries, and he was the only name that was being called. So his strength is that he said he does not seek to take power for himself. He wants to lead a transitional period so that Iranian people can eventually go to the ballot box and they decide for their own future. And what many people believe is about Prince Reza Pahlavi is that he's genuinely and they believe that he sincerely wants to bring democracy to Iran, because his message and position has remained consistent over the past 47 years. And he hasn't changed his stance.
And Shahrzad, is it
okay? I just want to add that. I just want to add that there are groups that oppose him. Like there are separatists, there are reformists who prefer that the Islamic Republic remain in power for their separatists. So there are those who oppose him.
Definitely a lot of different factions. Is it possible, though, for Iran to go straight from being ruled by a theocratic dictator to being ruled by a secular leader in favor of democracy? Or does there need to be a transition period like we're seeing in Venezuela with Delcy Rodriguez?
A transitional period is necessary, but not similar to what's happening in Venezuela. The transitional period needs to be done so that people can choose their own future, what the type of government they want. They want republic, they want monarchy, because these are the two main divisions among the public. That some say we want a republic for the future of Iran, not the Islamic Republic, just the democratic one, secular democracy. And then there are also monarchies, which are a large number. So the purpose of the transition period should be to ensure people have democratic right to decide their own future. But many Iranians say they do not want Islamic Republic to even remain in power even for a single day longer, like unlike what happened in Venezuela. And we've seen massive gatherings by Iranians around the world about that.
A lot to watch for here for sure. Shahrzad Ghani, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
The Trump administration says it's pushing for more nutrition education in medical schools as part of its effort to address chronic disease. Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says dozens of schools are now committing to expand that training. NTD's Christina Corona tells us more.
Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says dozens of medical schools are committing to expand nutrition education for future doctors. On Thursday, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Education announced that 53 medical schools across 31 states plan to increase nutrition training.
Beginning this fall, these schools will require every medical student to complete 40 hours of comprehensive nutrition education or competency equivalent before graduating. More than 30,000 physicians each year will now graduate equipped with nutrition education to help prevent, treat, and reverse chronic disease.
Kennedy says the U.S. spends about $4.5 trillion a year on health care, with roughly 90% going toward treating chronic disease. Kennedy made the announcement alongside Education Secretary Linda McMahon and leaders from the American Medical Association and the Association of American Medical Colleges.
It's a privilege to recognize the dozens of medical schools stepping up to strengthen nutrition education. Because to make America great again, we must first make it healthy again.
The administration also says the National Institutes of Health will provide $5 million in funding to help medical schools develop nutrition coursework and training programs. Meanwhile, Kansas, Ohio, Nevada, and Wyoming are among the latest states moving to restrict SNAP purchases of items like soda, energy drinks, and candy, joining several other states implementing limits on purchases of so-called junk foods with food assistance benefits. Christina Corona, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. For round-the-clock coverage, visit us at ntd.com/live or download our NTD app. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Good night.